Another year, another new video about the characters from Outta My Mind. This time, it's Chloe, the 90s chick. Chloe is the oldest of Sabrina's imaginary friends, and as you can see, obviously, she loves the 90s. She loves everything 90s, and she even does her hair like it's for the 90s, as well as wearing fashion for the 90s. Yeah, she is a 90s chick, literally in appearance. However, there is a downside to Chloe. She does not like anything after the 90s, obviously, but she doesn't like anything before the 90s. So, 70s, 80s, 60s, 50s, she hates them. She literally hates anything that is not 90s. And don't you dare refer to certain decades like the 2000s and the 80s as 90s, or vice versa, calling the 90s either an 80s decade or a 2000s decade, because Chloe will not murder you, but she will yell at you to the point that your ears will bleed from her. So Chloe in general is based by, you guessed it, 90s kids. You know them. The ones who claim that the 90s is the best decade ever and everything after the 90s is garbage. And they claim that today's music, TV shows, and movies are not as good as the 90s. And I'm gonna go on a rant in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I hate generation nicknames. You know them. Baby boomers, Gen X, millennials, Gen Z, Gen Alpha. I hate them. I hate generation nicknames. Why? Because I feel like that if you were born in a certain generation, you may feel like you belong in another generation, but according to the definition of the generation, you belong in that generation you were born in. Like, say if you were born in 1996, and you don't remember a lot of things that define the millennial generation, like 9/11, and you didn't watch a lot of movies that define the millennial generation, like, trying to think off the top of my head, Mean Girls, and oh my goodness, I can't think of the moment. I can't think anything else. Like, see, this is the thing. I don't know a lot of millennial stuff. I know certain stuff, but then I forget at the top of my head. But anyway, if you were born in 1996 and you don't remember a lot of things of the millennial generation and you end up identifying with the Gen Z stuff and you're like, okay, I'm a Gen Z, but according to the definition, no, 1996 is a millennial year, so you are a millennial. And then you're like, I'm too young to be a millennial, and now I'm like too old to be a Gen Z. What? And that also extends to those who were born between 1997 to 1999. They feel like they're too old to be, they're old to be Gen Zs, and they feel like, oh, we're millennials. But according to things like, no, you're too young to be a millennials. Yeah, that's why I hate generation nicknames with a burning passion. And there's another thing too. If the millennial years is supposed to be 1981 to 1986, how come geriatric millennials is 1980 to 1985, not 1981 to 1986? Because, like, does that mean 1980 is no longer Gen X year? It's now millennial year? Like, this doesn't make any sense. If, like, the generation nicknames don't make sense. Like, if the generation for millennials is 1980 to 1995, then the geriatric millennials being 1980 to 1985 would make a lot more sense than the millennial years being 1981 to 1986. I'm just saying. Oops. I meant to say 1981 to 1996. I am such a dumb nut. You can see me, I'm like going off rambles here. However, during my round of generation nicknames, there is a silver lining. There's a thing called cuspers. What is a cusper? Well, cuspers are those who are born at the end of one generation and the beginning of another generation. So, if you were born between like 1964 and 1969, you are part Gen X, part baby boomer. So you are Generation Jones. And if you were born between 1977 and 1985, you're considered X-Millennial, Gen X and Millennials. And there's a millennial thing is kind of like going back and forth. We don't know like what starts the end of one generation of Millennials and then the start of the beginning of Gen Z. So like, Millennials is getting a little wonky. But I feel so happy to say there's a cusp generation, so I can feel content knowing that I feel like both 50% millennial and 50% Gen Z at the same time. I feel so content that I feel like a cusp for both. So I am a proud Zillennial, babies. Woo! Which, by the way, that is the name for the cusp of millennials and Gen Z. Zillennials. So yeah, I'm a proud Zillennial, baby. Woo! And I'm also a proud 2000s chick, because I remember stuff in the 2000s that I do in the 90s. Okay, and I ran back onto Chloe. Yeah, in a nutshell, Chloe's definitely inspired by the 90s kids. But I took it further by having Chloe not liking anything before and after the 90s. So that's an evidence of Chloe being really exaggeration of 90s kids. Like, they won't watch anything that's not made in the 90s. And I also have stories of her kind of getting into shenanigans with other decades kids, like the 80s kids and the 70s kids, especially with Gloria, like, Chloe and Gloria really don't like each other because they're like the opposites of the decades. Gloria's all 70s and Chloe is all 90s. So yeah, these two, they do not get along. They really hate each other's guts like crazy. And to go the opposite direction of two decades hating each other, we have one decade that loves that decade, but the decade in particular does not like them. Particularly, it's Chloe and Kimberly. Kimberly loves Chloe because she's a 90s girl like her, but Chloe does not because she does not look like 90s. And yes, Kimberly was inspired by the prologue of Central Intelligence, you know, the one with Dwayne Johnson and Kevin Hart. Like, I saw a bit of the prologue because the prologue took place in 1996, and when I saw it, I was just like, some of these people in the crowds do not look like they're from the 90s. They look like they bought the clothes from Forever 21 and just slapped them look like 90s and boom, that's 90s. This is like, no, you're not 90s. You're just like the hipster equivalent of 90s. So I decided to put that into a character named Kimberly. Like, Kimberly is the 90s wannabe. She wants to be the 90s, but in reality, she's not. And Chloe's like, no, you are not a 90s girl. You are a 90s kid's wannabe, so go away. I don't want you in my life. And like the 2000s kids mistaking things from the 2000s as 90s, Kimberly mistakes everything from the 90s. Like, the music from the 80s, that's 90s. Music from the 2000s, 90s. Music from the 2010s, boom, 90s. 2020s, that's 90s too. Like, Kimberly is not that bright. Like, she does not know anything about that's 90s. Like, she is a dumb brunette. I just want to go in the opposite direction of the dumb blonde and the brainy brunette. It's the dumb brunette. And Chloe's more like has a temper. She's like a feisty blonde than like a brainy blonde. But she's smarter than you think. I realize I'm talking about Kimberly. I should go back to Chloe. Now, even though Chloe loves the 90s, there are some 90s stuff that she will not tolerate. Like boy bands. Chloe doesn't care for boy bands. But I know there's a little bit of concern about things girls like being hated. So I just wanted to balance that out with Chloe liking teen heartthrobs of the 90s. However, she does not get why Sabrina loves Alex Rockwell so much. Like, she calls Rockwell an irrelevant pop star like all singers out today. A reference how people complain about how today's music and singers are garbage. And Sabrina does not like any minute of Chloe trashing Alex Rockwell. Yes, this is a commentary about the one slur, like, from the Illuminations' take on the Lorax. Like, how he's popular with girls, but those who are fans of the original Lorax book, they don't like how the one slur is fully seen, and how he's depicted. Like, he's sympathetic, he's attractive, and he's fully seen. And the fans of the book are like, no, I hate this, we hate this, go away, Illumination, you're horrible, go. Like, that's how I envision, like, Sabrina really loves the one slur, and Chloe's like, no. So, people, or Toonsies, if you don't like Illumination's take of the one slur and the Lorax, Chloe's got your back. Despite the fact that she's a 90s kid, so she's gonna hate the one slur regardless. And she'll hate the original book too, because it's not made in the 90s. Now, you know Chloe loves to watch 90s movies and shows, but she loves to watch it with her family. Imaginary family, that is. But especially with Blair. Why? Because Chloe managed to cheer Blair up by showing her an episode of her favorite television show after she was disappointed by Disney's Pinocchio, which is technically Latino because I don't want to get sued by Disney. And Blair's favorite television show is Courage Cowardly Dog, or The Cat Who's Scared of Everything. And they're watching the one with the parody of Freaky Fred. Yep, I posted it on the 20th anniversary of Courage Cowardly Dog. That story on Tumblr, I mean. But yeah, Chloe loves interacting with Blair, and she loves to watch scary movies with her because she knows that Blair loves horror movies and scary stuff. But it's 90s horror movies. However, Chloe gets scared more than Blair. The most notable example of this, when Chloe gets scared of a 90s horror movie when she watches it with Blair, is the one that is clearly inspired by the pilot episode Bonkers. And yes, I consider Out of My Mind to take place in the same universe as Bonkers. But why would Hollywood want to make a movie based on Bonkers nearly getting laminated? I don't know. It's Hollywood for ya. And it's also a TV movie. And speaking of Chloe getting scared of 90s horror movies, she's also rather immature for being the oldest of Sabrina's imaginary friends. Like, she'll throw a fit over certain things like a 90s vending machine being removed or a 90s show getting rebooted. Seriously, Chloe is more childish than Felicity. And Felicity's supposed to be the youngest of Sabrina's imaginary friends. So that's the character file of Chloe. I'm sorry for being a little awkward, even by my standards of being unscripted, but I have a lot going on this year. And not to mention, I have a new video coming up that is gonna blow you Toonsies away, but not in a good way, so watch out for that. But I hope you Toonsies like this character file of Chloe. And if you 90s kids like Chloe and resonate with her, leave a like and a comment down below. This is Cartoon Princess, and I'll see you all next time.